Morning, everybody. Welcome to the Huntress session. Huntress is a cliff tea from the Wulong Mountains. We're in the middle of a 6-week series on cliff teas. This is week number 4. So we've talked about several things over the past few weeks, including some cultural perspectives, some processing information. We haven't talked a lot about the economy related to WET and some of the initiatives that are in contradiction to some of the local customs. So today, we'll talk a little bit about that, and then we'll talk briefly about some of the terms related to cliff tea, because there are a lot of terms out there which address cliff tea. You've got rock charm, you've got bone taste, all these things that from a Western perspective, oh my God, are they eating ribs with the tea? And the answer would be no, of course. That bone taste refers to something else. And we'll get into that a little bit. So let's go ahead and kick this off. Actually, before I do, let me say that we continue to be unclear about what the future is in terms of tariffs and so forth, but we're not worried, and our order this year is going to be substantially less, and we've got a portion of it in, and we have a little bit more coming. So beyond the order of we think around 10%, unless we find something unusual or unless the circumstances are changed. All right, so let's talk about history and economy and custom in the Wulong Mountains, because that's a fun place to talk about anything. We talk about the fact that the Confucianists, Taoists, and Buddhists all got along in that area. We've talked about the schools were run slightly differently in that area. More loosely run. We've talked about a sense of heightened awareness of ecology, and it was partially linked to the use of the word feng shui, which is geomancy, which really refers to where you are in position to the objects around you as to whether your life is going to go smoothly or it's going to be obstacles. Simple as that. But what we haven't talked about is who sets the standards for cliff tea? Who sets the price for cliff tea? And over the years, has that changed? So, just like in the old days, in Western civilization, if a king started or a queen started wearing something, that became, if it was available, very popular within society. So actually, nobles and leaders set a standard. It was almost never the other way around, going from bottom up. Same as is in China. So the imperial court set the standard. Now, you had layers of people who contributed and added. And who were those layers? And tea is an unusual situation because those layers actually involved almost everybody. You really didn't have peasants involved in that as much, but you certainly had merchants. You certainly had local political people. You did have people in the trades who were part of that as well, because they had competitions and they sat together. This is one of the few things where they all sat together. And so therefore it kind of bridged the philosophical / religious world, Buddhists, with leaders, country leaders, celebrity merchants, celebrity tradespeople. They all sit together, come together and have tea. And the Wui tea, for a long time, was seen as outstanding tea. So from at least pre-Tang Dynasty, so from at least 600 on 600 AD onwards, tea from that area was recognized as, oh, this is really unusual. And ooh, there's minerality in this tea. Wow, that's really unusual. I'm not getting that in Dragonwell. Dragonwell has Dragonwell characteristics. Heirloom has heirloom characteristics, and they're famous for different characteristics. The Wui teas had the minerality, the rockness, so to speak, of the tea as its underlying characteristic. And that was recognized at the imperial court as this is really good stuff. And by the way, by the Yuan dynasty, hey, you know what? We're going to establish an office in the Wui Mountains, and we're going to actually get the peasants to bring a portion of the tea to us. We're going to make the tea for the court. So, and that started the Yuan dynasty, 1271 to 13 something, about 1350, 1360, roughly in that range. And so that started this. It didn't start, it continued this tradition of the imperial court and the high officials set the stage. Yeah, that's good stuff. Everybody wants this stuff. Can everybody get it? And the answer is no. If you lived in the Wui Mountains, of course you could get it. But outside of the Wui Mountains, if you weren't money, you couldn't get it. So there's an economic component. And it was driven by unusual, by scarcity, right? All right, so things go all the way down to the Qing dynasty. And we know actually sometime in the late Ming dynasty, they started the steps to do Wui tea. We don't know the exact year, but by the Qing dynasty, 1644, all the way to 1911, those are exact dates. By the Qing dynasty, there's all of a sudden, yeah, a realization. This is good. And if I can get it, I'm a poet. Why shouldn't I be able to get this? And actually, pre-Qing poets were getting tea from this area. They just weren't getting Clifton, Wulong. They were getting Clifton. That's interesting, this use of terms. I suddenly realized that Clifton just references the place. It doesn't reference Wulong. So from that time forward, if you think about the Wui Mountains and divide them in half, of course, you can't exactly divide them in half, but the Western Wui Mountains was producing one type of tea and the Eastern was producing another. So this is important because as it turns out, British and European continent interest in the Wui teas also led to pressure on pricing. So remembering our history, when it was sent to Britain, did they talk about Wui tea? No, they used another term that's a Fujianese romanization of the word Wui, and they call it Bohea, B-O-H-E-A. Now, sadly, there's a couple things that are footnotes to this. First off, when we had the Boston Tea Party, Bohea tea was thrown in the harbor. That was a big throw. That's the first thing. Secondly, if you ask me, can I, with 100% certainty, tell you where that tea was from, west or east? The answer is no, I cannot. Does it make a difference? Who the heck cares? Well, it does make a difference because Western Wui tea was the Chongwu Guan tea. So that's the smoky pine, that's some red teas, divine plum. It's those type of teas that are basically being done in the Western Republic. They did have some cliff teas, but it wasn't zhengmian. It wasn't that rocky, elemental taste. It was a very good taste, but it wasn't that taste. You go to the eastern part, you have the rock formations, which created that minerality within the tea. That rock charm, so to speak, the bones of the tea, so to speak. So we don't know whether it was Western Bohemia or Eastern Bohemia. They were just modern Bohemia, those that went into the Boston Harbor. And that enthusiasm from the British and the people on the European continent provided an element of competition and therefore also drove the price up. Most of the Bohea tea that was going to Europe, but not exclusively all, was more the smoky tea and the red teas. But there was actually some of the cliff tea. And again, I made this mistake again. Some of the Oolong cliff tea that was going to Europe as well. It was well liked, but hard to come. So all along through the Qing dynasty, there's pressure. Change of government, 1949. Is that pressure relieved? Yes and no, because China is cut off from the rest of the world, so there's no competition. That's seen as a bourgeois luxury, so, oh, okay, can't get that. And the whole feeling of the economy was changing, because food was becoming more important as the element of what needed to be grown and what needed to be provided to the population. So this was the one time where the actual price of the tea was very low. Very low. You're probably thinking, gosh, I wish I had lived during that time. I could have just gone in there, picked up 100 pounds of this and 100 pounds of that. This been set for life. The answer to that is no also. And the reason it's no is because the production was cut and it wasn't really being distributed in the same way that it was before. Now, fast forward to the start of the 80s, it's still very cheap. And people in the know, of course, were going to the Wulong Mountains, but they were mostly local because Chinese weren't wealthy enough yet to travel around the country and go get this stuff. So from the 80s, as the 80s moved forward and China prospered, all of a sudden there's this thought, yeah, I've heard of these Oolong cliff teas. Maybe I should have some. And so you'd have people bring it to you, and the price, gradually started to reflect that. And it started to reflect the fact that elite tea connoisseurs understood, oh, this is really good. And therefore, I want this. And then when we got rearranged in 1990, and rearranged, what I mean by that is they got the status of World Heritage Site, which meant that the people living scattered throughout the mountains all had to be relocated outside of those places so that they didn't damage the ecology and the beauty of the area. All of a sudden now, there's real interest. And there becomes a gift factor. What do I mean a gift factor? You mean Chinese didn't give gifts before this time? Oh no, they always give gifts. But this became recognized as an important gift if you wanted something important. Because the value of this tea became higher and higher. And as it became higher and higher, this created a sense of elitism about it. And so what do I mean by this? If you had that type of money and you wanted to accomplish something, officials like that stuff. People like that stuff. So if you could go and make the trek and get it, that was good. And the economy was becoming And transportation was becoming easier and easier. It wasn't easy yet, but it was becoming easier. So you have this steady increase in price. Recognition, access, usefulness, all of a sudden you get more and more price attached to that. Now, in the early 2000s, was this aligned with thought pattern of how to develop peasants' lives vis-a-vis tea? Now, this is a broad question because the economists were looking throughout China. Oh yeah, you got these famous teas, Dragon Well, Heirloom. What if we could enrich everybody's life, and everybody being not really the way I said it, but what if we could enrich more peasants' lives by having the protein? Let's figure out a way that we can spread the wealth, so to speak. This ran up against customers, and it ran up against a couple types of customers. Who understands Wu tea? The people in Wu, the people who speak the Fujian dialect, they really understand. They've got terms that outsiders have a hard time grasping. Dao Qing, what is Dao Qing? It's not what I've heard. Well, all sorts of terms. Even the terms that one has heard of. So Qing, make the green, make the black, make the blue, whatever. Qing can be translated any of those things. It's actually make the blue. These terms were not well understood outside of the mountains because not so many people understood this complicated process. And yet there was more and more enthusiasm for this tea. So part of the initiatives is the thought pattern is, what if we can take varietals and move them to other places? We have people create these or grow these varietals and teach them the way to do Wulong tea. Will that work in terms of spreading the wealth? Two things argued against it. One of which you know right away, which is Torah. You're not going to do a Wuli cliff tea. You're not going to do any Oolong cliff tea in Hangzhou where dragons ain't going to happen because the Shangchang, and that literally means Torah. That is the soil, the microclimates. It's not the same. The end result will not be the same. So that was one conflict that was hard to bridge. In fact, unbridgeable, really, if you think about it. So the second part was, okay, let's see if we can grow more outside of the original area. Let's just expand the area because the soil is somewhat the same. And so this is where you had that thought, but this terroir was different as you move farther and farther away from the central area. Zhangyan, the highest area. And in fact, they were well defined. Zhangyan, and then you had Dayan, then you had Banyan, and then you had Zhoushan, and then you had Waishan. So you go from the core to a little outside of the core, to half outside the core, down the mountain, out of the area. The tea outside of the area does not taste anything. Well, if I say it like that, it really doesn't taste anything like the tea within them. Yes.
So what would you say are the key characteristics? Is it the intensity when you get outside of the mountain versus in the mountain or even towards the outer edges of the mountain? Is it the degree of minerality that is the greatest difference in flavor? Or are there other subtle or less subtle differences between in the mountain and on the very edge?
This is a great question. So this questioner says, look, you defined 5 different layers from the center to far away. Why and what are people using as a guideline, as a standard to define. Is taste, is it a geographical line? What gives here? And so, your guess is correct, by the way. Which is that minerality is unreplicable. That's probably not a word, but it sounds like it's a word. It's a lot of letters, so we'll pretend it's a word. It cannot be replicated if you don't have those basic conditions. That's the first thing. So this is a really interesting question because not only you have asked that question, but economists at that time who were thinking about this whole situation asked the same question. And they said, well, wait a minute. I mean, I don't see a line in the soil which says this is only half of the mountain, or a line in the soil which is this is greatly in the mountain. I mean, you mean if I take one more step, I don't have that soil? So the answer is complicated. Because the answer isn't totally no, and it isn't totally yes. And here's what makes it complicated. You have custom. So custom and culture drive definitions of taste and definitions of quality. And so why just a few minutes ago I talked about the Fujianese defining cliff tea. This is, and using language to define it. They, hundreds of years ago, already put in place a structure which says, oh no, this hugely rocky taste, this hugely elemental taste that I get from within this area where I live, that's cliff tea. That's the rock rhythm. That's the rock charm. That's the rock taste. And as I get further away from that, it isn't that there's a line, a physical line. There is a soil line. Can you see that line? No. Can I see that line? No. But I can taste that line because once you get outside of that area, it's obvious. Does that mean, and let's be real clear about this because it sounds like I'm saying one thing. I want to make sure that you're not hearing it a certain way. Once you start tasting, beyond that center area, and you recognize, you sold this to me as real in the mountain cliff tea. This doesn't taste anything like it. It's thin. There's no minerality that goes down my throat. I'm unhappy. So the real question is, once you get to anywhere outside of that minerality tasting, heavy taste, thick, dense, prominent, obvious taste, into almost a zero of that, does that mean that this tea is no good? That's not what I said. It's not that it's no good, but don't sell it to me as Wulong cliff tea. You can have great tea outside of the mountain, but don't sell it to me like it's inside the mountain. And so we have this cultural barrier already in place, and the economists who are trying to, get this taken care of because we want to enrich more people. It's like, yeah, you go ahead and keep talking about your plans and you do your plans. But we're not going to stop using the terms. The government went so far as to say, okay, tired of this argument. In the mountain, we're not going to be permitted to be on packaging. You cannot use that term anymore. Now, if I tell you you can't use a term anymore in writing, and I'm the law, you're just not going to use that term in writing. But you're still going to say it to everybody who's around you. And when people come in, hey, you can have that thing. what do you call that name again? And you say that term, you're not gonna go to jail. And so the result is that failed, because that term had a wide enough distribution that even people far away would come back in to the Woolly Mountains, or they go to their tea pavilion. Hey, I want 50. I'm not kidding you. I want real tea. I want in the mountain. Hey, there's a place up there, Horsehead, Depression. I want it from there. And so the result is that all the attempts to try and enrich people using the cliff tea, Wulong cliff tea, failed, really, because culturally people were attached, and the local people didn't stop talking about, where's that from again? Is that from the Horsehead, or is that from the house place, or is that from Bland place? They all knew these terms and they used them. And so the aficionados, the tea elite, they picked up these terms. And so it's really hard to change that out. And so today, these enormous numbers, the government has said the following. They've said no tea should sell for more than, I believe they said $10,000 US per pound. I believe that's what they said. And they said should not sell for that. Okay. So you're not going to go to any store and see, oh, this thing's $30,000. No, you will not see that. However, if you go to the farmer where it's real scarce, how much is this stuff? Oh, friend, we know how much it is. Okay, I know what that means. Reach in your wallet, you put the requisite amount there. And then you get this very specialty. So there has been this push and pull of how do we make people richer from this valuable treasure, and then the arms around this valuable treasure. Heck no. This thing has its own merits because of location, because of terroir. You can't say varietal, can you? Because you can move varietals all over the place. So instead, and because of custom. There are reliable varietals that have forever, that is the wrong word, for a long time, as long as people can remember, have grown in that place. So they've become associated through history, through stories. Scarlet Robe will never be mistaken. Oh, did you get your scarlet robe in Oolong Mountain? And everybody will laugh at you because it's impossible. It's in the psyche. It's the stories are in the psyche. What's in my psyche? In my psyche, I could feel that I was over talking. That's what was in my psyche. But I really wanted to go through this because we don't talk about these things very much. And I know I didn't quite get to rock charm and bones and so forth. We'll talk about that next week because I'm afraid if I start down that road, you'll be thirsty and I'll run out of time. Two very ugly results. Now, you notice again, I'm sitting here and we have a different view behind us. Well, we're going to take a 10-second commercial break. Oh, I guess it's not going to be a commercial break. I'm going to walk from here to around to the other part, and the tea master is going to demonstrate Huntress. So I'll be with you in under 10. Okay, we're back on this side. The beautiful Bijou tea master will demonstrate Huntress.
Yeah.
A tea toy, a fun rock, and another tea toy, and one 16-ounce cup. And she's filling another I Ching pot with 200-degree water. remembering, we talked about this last week, heat. Heat is the key to woolly cliff teas. Heat inside, heat outside. And this is when brewing only. This does not refer to when brewing. Making sure that the cup is clean and hot. The tea master, you know, she uses tools so that she doesn't have to use her hands to touch the tea. We're fanatic, and you all already all know that. So what we're trying to do is prevent any outside flavors from influencing the final product. And stuff that's on your hands, like lotion or anything that you didn't expect from a previous activity, that could get on the leaves and affect the flavor. And that's why we use these tools. All right, pouring and using a pot with a spout so she can control the pour and not pour as much as possible directly on the leaves. Because you're not trying to get a spark out of one leaf, you're trying to almost, in effect, pour under the leaves. So you can get them all involved in the action simultaneously. Okay, so this is all set up this way. Your timer, which, yes, I did push the button, 3 minutes, 50 seconds. How many grams was that? That was 8 grams in this particular pot. So Huntress comes from within the mountain. And it is, I'm not going to tell you, give away the taste profile, but it is definitely recognizable as a cliff tea, a cliff Wulong tea. And there's nothing unusual in the picking. So it goes through the normal steps of picking. There's about, in this particular tea, because it's more heavily roasted, this goes closer to the 28 or 29 steps. And when you ask me, if you forced me to say what are the 2 most important steps, I would tell you it's making the green and it's the charcoaling of this. And that's, oh gosh, I use charcoaling. It's the baking of this. Baking is a better description of this, because both of those skills are the most sought after skills when making this tea, when producing this tea. And the person who makes the green and the people who do the baking are the highest paid of all the workers. So that shows you A, scarcity of skill, and B, how important that skill really is. So there's a saying in Chinese, Kantian Zouqing, Kanqing, Kanqing Zouqing. So it's a funny saying because it's like you look at the weather when you go through the making the green process, you look at the leaves when going through the making the green process. And what that really implies is such details is it foggy? Is the sun out? How many hours since it was picked until you're doing the making the green step? What is making the green? It's essentially bruising the leaves. That's what it is. it's the process. And I say it like it's one thing. Oh, you just take a hammer, bang, bonk, bruise, next one, bonk, bruise. No, it doesn't work that way. You do it over time, and you do it through process, and you do it through shaking. Make the green. The baking is incredibly complex because if you at any time, and think of making cookies. Okay. So if you have underbaked, you can kind of sense it before you pull it out of the oven. There's ways to do that. But if you overbake, what happens? Oh no, charred. Let's see, do I have a little cookie grater where I can scrape off the charred version? It's as disastrous. In fact, worse so, because the such high value, if you overcook, there's no recovery. Okay, timer is off. I always love watching the Tea Master pour this because you notice she always has it rotating in this direction and it always develops into such a beautiful color. When you first see the pour come out, it's lighter and then it just keeps getting darker and darker and darker. Love this. Oh, and what else do I love? I love this aroma. And of course, I'm doing this out of order. Oops. Let's do this in order. So let's enter the tasting arena, quality arena, actually. And so what I'm going to do is take an inhalation. It's 200-degree inhalation. Let it roll around on my tongue. Figure out where the astringency is, where and what the aftertaste is, and what energetics there are. And then I'm going to go back and look for the rock bones. We'll talk about those next week. And the rock charm, we'll talk about that next week. Taste and aroma. God, I'll tell you, I am so lucky that there's a tea master at the shop because if I had brewed this, it wouldn't taste like this. I get where the astringency, I'm supposed to be talking about astringency. Things are all out of order this morning. I apologize. Astringency. Yes, there is astringency. This is a real tea. Oh, it's a real cliff tea too. I get an aftertaste on this. Energetics, I'm working on that. Want to take a second sip? Wow. Okay, your turn to brew. And you set your timer for 3 minutes and 50 seconds. Make sure your water is at 200 degrees. Okay. You know, there's always a rhythm in this, and each of us has this rhythm in us. And what's the difference between all of us? Well, it's adherence to technique. As you get closer to getting the full technique and understanding the full technique of doing this type of tea, your rhythm will be within a certain range. Nobody's rhythm is exactly the same, but some rhythms are wildly different because lack of technique or not a clear understanding of technique. But once everybody's on the same page, and we see this when we go to schools that teach how to make tea in China. In the beginning, you see every sort of rhythm, some scary rhythms too. And then as you go to more advanced classes, you see gradations of rhythm, and they're within boundaries because they all know the technique, and their execution of the technique is linked to their personality, just like, by the way, making of these cliff teas is linked to the personality. The Ching that I talked about a minute ago is linked to that expert's personality. So everybody who is in that position has a slightly different rhythm, but they're within a narrow range that you would recognize right away. Ooh, yeah, Ching does it a little faster, does it a little higher, does it a little lower. All of these things are possible because they know what they're trying to achieve. They understand the varietal, and they also understand what the variables are. All right. So I do want to talk about one piece of news this week in the shop because I can't control myself, but you all already knew that. So this won't come as a surprise that it's such a large digression. But one of you this week brought in incredible mooncakes from scratch, and that was Rob. And I don't think I've been as surprised as I was that morning in a long time, because not just that they were done, because there's one sort of accomplishment to do something. Then there's another accomplishment to do it great. And they were great picks. So I took a small digression, and I'm going to come back to this. The same effort and the same attention to detail, because Rob went through the details of how he put together those mooncakes. That's that same concentration and the same type of attention to detail that the producers of these teas go through. This is not a casual process. Everything from the picking all the way to the brewing is part of the details. If they adhere to the details and make a great product in the first 30 details, and in the last 10 details of brewing, it's messed up. Was the product any good? Well, yeah, it was. But did you get the benefit of it? No, you didn't. And so this is what I love about our craft. And this is what I love about your appreciation of the craft, that you ask questions related to details. And you always do. And you always do focus on the details. And the details at the end of the day become very, very important in determining the highest value of what you get. What is highest value? Getting the most out of that leaf that started 40 steps ago. And that's what we're doing this morning. That leaf which started so many steps ago and went through so many steps and so many stages of review and so many stages, particularly of the baking and getting to this spot. That's what makes Cliff Oolong teas just totally amazing. People sometimes say, oh, a great green tea is equivalent to a Cliff tea. I would argue that yes, taste can be magical in any tea category, but the Cliff teas take the most amazing number of steps, and things can go so wrong in any of those steps. Green tea, how many steps do you have? Just by virtue of the fact there's only 5 or 6 steps. Oops. And I said it wrong. Not only 5 or 6 steps, because if you mess up one of those steps, it's real bad too. But there's fewer steps to mess up. And that's one of the reasons I think I appreciate the cliff teas so much. All right, your timer went off. You're separating the tea water from the tea leaves. Hopefully you're producing a beautiful color, a huntress color. All right. Now, it's your turn to enter the quality arena and tell me what you're seeing, feeling, noticing, tasting, aroma, any of those things. This is just fun. And they go through this in the same process, by the way, during the competitions. We love being there during the competitions because sometimes they allow us to participate off to the side. Yes.
Peter observes the first sip is utterly clean, crisp, like mountaintop air. Immediately, it feels like every aspect is precise engineering to fit perfectly. But to carry that analogy forward, I still have yet to look under the hood.
Love this comment, Peter. Taste, first taste, crisp and clean. It's like it's been perfectly engineered. I like that picture because when I think of the farmers going through the process and the producers going through the process and getting to this end result, in a way, it is perfectly engineered. And it's not, when you say perfectly engineered, it's engineered by humans who have a long history in their head, a long lineage in their head. And just like grandma, they know when to shorten it up, when to lengthen it out. Yes.
Rob shares there's a honey corn sweetness in the scent.
Honey corn sweetness in the scent from Rob. And one of the things that this echoes actually what I felt just a few minutes ago, when I first smelt this, because it's like, oh gosh. And I don't know, in some ways, I'm still a kid. And I'm still that kid that before the holidays and there's presents, and I'm thinking about the presents. I wonder what's there, and that anticipation. And even though I even might have already guessed what's there, you know what? The first smell of this tea, I know what's here. I've had this before, but it's like I'm in love again.
Jen says the scent to me has ripe plum on top of forest.
Scent of ripe plums on top of forest. I love this because it builds on Rob's. Because Rob talked about honeycorn sweetness. So Jen has said, okay, I get the fruit out of this. Plum, and oh, by the way, this is from the forest. It's outside.
Such an interesting combination. And Jen also layers in another fruit, little light lemon zest that comes and goes.
Light lemon zest that comes and goes. Why do I like this? I like this because there is that hint, and Jen modified it correctly. Light. It's there in the background. It isn't the first thing you taste, but as you're continuing to re-fall in love with it is like, oh, that's why it's got this little light zest in it.
As a follow-up, so that was all scent. Then Jen observes the taste of the tea water is smooth and a surprisingly delightful balance of minerality, wet rocks, and red plum, black currant, and possibly some light notes of tobacco and leather that come and go in the background.
Love this description. So Jen is now moved from scent to taste. And is the first word out was incredible because that first word echoed what was in my head. Smooth, mellow. And then, oh, there's a balance. A balance of what? There's wet rocks in here, minerals, and currant, plum. Did I get everything?
And then in the background, a little tobacco
Oh.
and leather, but comes and goes, comes and goes.
Love this. Little tobacco and leather. And for me, I really identify with that leather because I get that. And it's not out of balance. And as she says, it comes and goes, but it's something in there which is kind of making everything smooth and go all the way to the back of the throat. This thing does not stop on the start of your tongue. So therefore, we know, given already what you have noted, that I didn't lie to you today. Oh, and I'm wearing the right type of clothes not to lie to me. So,
Minute, that's silk, not linen.
well, I have to be especially careful with the silk,
Okay.
especially truthful when it's silk. So that's the quality of outstanding in the mountain. It goes all the way back and doesn't let you forget. Hey, I'm here. And again, I really like the smooth and the balance because there's so much going on in this. And as you drink down, there's a steadiness also to this. And I love that steadiness. Okay. We've done well today. You've done great. We covered a little bit of history and economy. We covered some culture today. We didn't talk very much about the terms, but I got another couple weeks to get through all of these terms. And I will get into rock charm, rock rhythm, bones, floralness. I'll get into all that stuff because when talking about cliff teas in China, they frequently touch on each of those type of terms. And they're making a judgment when they use those terms because they're modifying the terms in some way. And we'll talk about that next week because it's a lot of fun. These teas are just fun. Now, what am I going to, oh, go ahead.
Oh, Peter, as a comment, I find this cliff tea powerful, but not heavy. In fact, clarifying on the inside.
Love this comment. Peter's comment is powerful, but not heavy. And it's clarifying. And this is a really, this is the type of a comment that they would actually make in China because there is that appreciation between, oh, you smacked me in the face. That was kind of coarse versus, oh, you just outfoxed me completely and I didn't even notice. And you have that type of rhythm and power. This has a rhythm and power inherently in it that doesn't smack you in the face. It invites you. Peter last week had another gem. He said, last week that was yearning, that the tea came and met him. And that in other weeks, he has to go meet the tea. This is another coming to meet you type of tea, but not in a way which makes you scared or, oh my God, look at the color of that. I wonder if I might be able to stand that. Or, oh, that smell has so much minerality. None of those things. Instead, what'd you all lead off with? Plums. Oh, I love plums. Sweet. Honeycorn. I love sweet. So this is the magic in Huntress. All right. Next week, what are we going to do? Well, I think we're going to do Harbinger, another wonderful cliff tea. So again, your responsibilities this week, stay healthy. Weather is changing. Make sure we're in real good shape. And I look forward to seeing everybody again next week. Bye-bye now.
Take care, everybody.